Hello and welcome to another lightning talk on Amazon ECS and AWS Fargate. This is Sandeep Palavalsa. I'm a Senior Specialist Solutions Architect with Container Services. Today we'll be talking about Amazon ECS capacity providers. Capacity providers manages the scaling of the infrastructure on which your applications are running on Amazon ECS cluster. Capacity providers support both the Amazon EC2 and AWS Fargate as compute options. Both EC2 and Fargate compute can exist on a single ECS cluster, but today we will be focusing on AWS Fargate as the compute option. Capacity provider strategies is the way for you to define how you want to spread these tasks across different capacity providers, which we'll look into in a minute. Let's see how you can get started on using capacity providers for Fargate. You first will create a ECS cluster and attach the Fargate and Fargate Spot capacity providers that are already available for you to be attached. And then you can simply run your tasks or schedule your workloads on these capacity providers. You might be wondering, why do we need AWS Fargate as a capacity providers when you can simply schedule or run a task using Run Task API without the capacity providers? The reason for that is capacity providers gives you additional control as to where you want to schedule your workloads on, whether it is Fargate or Fargate Spot as a compute option, or you can mix and match both of them as well. Fargate Spot is the unused capacity available on Fargate for up to 70% off of the Fargate pricing. Just like EC2 Spot, if you're familiar with that concept, Fargate Spot can also be reclaimed with a 2-minute notification. For Fargate Spot, we take care of the automatic diversification across multiple instance types and families in such a way that you can get the most optimal Fargate Spot capacity. Fargate Spot is best for applications that are fault tolerant and can recover from terminations. Let's look into capacity provider strategies. Primarily, the capacity provider strategies has two different knobs to turn. The base defines the minimum number of tasks that need to be scheduled on a given capacity provider, and the weight defines the ratio in which the rest of the tasks will be divided across these capacity providers. Let's look at an example where we have 5 tasks running for your service. With the example strategy that we are seeing on the screen, there will be a base of 3 tasks that will be scheduled on Fargate, and from there on, anything additional than that will be equally distributed since the weights are equal here. If you turned on automatic scaling for your application, and there is a need for scaling out your application to 7 tasks in this example, the additional 2 tasks will again be equally distributed across these capacity providers because their weights are 1:1. Automatic scaling for your application and want to meet your demands or demand spikes, then it may be a good idea to over provision your service with additional percentage of tasks. In this example, we have shown how you can use Fargate Spot to bring you that over provision capacity while with a fraction of cost and continue to meet your demands and not having to wait for the tasks to be scaled. With that, let's look at a quick demo on how you can set up the cluster with capacity providers and also run a sample application. To begin with, let's go to ECS console on AWS and go ahead and create a cluster. We're gonna name the cluster demo cluster, and under the infrastructure, you can see that there are options for you to add Fargate capacity or EC2 capacity. And you can also choose to create the cluster empty. In our example, since we want the Fargate capacity providers to be available, we will check this box, which will attach the Fargate and Fargate Spot capacity providers. With that, let's go ahead and create that cluster. You can see the progress of cluster creation in the CloudFormation as well, if you would like. Now you see the cluster is already available here. Let's go into the cluster and really quick check the infrastructure. You can now see the capacity providers that are already attached. And then for defining a default capacity provider strategy, you can do that on your cluster to make sure any service that is running on your cluster can make use of that certain standard that you established. You would want to click on the update cluster, and you can see there is no default capacity provider strategy. Let's go ahead and add the default strategy here. I'll select Fargate, and I want to have the base of 3 and a weight of 1. And then I want to add Fargate Spot as well, but this time only a weight of 1, and there's no base for it. Let's go ahead and update the cluster. Now let's look at how we can configure a sample application. I have defined a task definition here specific to Fargate, which has one container that is running a sample web application on HTTPD container that says a welcome page greeting that you have reached the application. Let's use that task definition to create a service. Let's go back to the cluster, go to the services tab, and hit create cluster. As you can see, by default, it'll populate to use the default capacity provider strategy. You may choose to customize that to your specific needs of your application. Maybe you want to run entirely on Fargate Spot. You can remove the Fargate capacity provider in that case. For our example, let's go ahead and use the capacity provider strategy that is default to the cluster. And we'll select the task definition that we just showed, which is Fargate task. And we are gonna name the service as demo service 1. We are going to request a capacity of 12 desired tasks. And for this example, I'll be running this workload on the default VPC, but create a new security group that allows HTTP traffic to go through. In a production setup, you might want to run on a custom VPC that is holding the workloads on a private subnet and not allow access to HTTP from everywhere. We'll also turn on the public IP address here. Let's go ahead and create that service. It's going to take a minute while the service is getting created. As the service is coming up, let's go ahead and list the services and the tasks related to that service and see where these tasks are scheduled. You can see from this table here that there are a base of 3 Fargate tasks that are configured, and on top of it, the additional 9 of them are equally distributed at a ratio of 1:1 between Fargate and Fargate Spot. You can also look at the status of the service here. And if I go into the service and the tasks and look at one of the running tasks, and if you open the public IP address of the application, you can see that the application has been successfully deployed. So we have just witnessed how you can spread your workloads across multiple capacity providers and make use of Fargate Spot for expanding and over provisioning your compute capacity. With that, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about capacity providers.